So, you may have heard about Content ID, the digital fingerprinting technology that YouTube uses to recognize music and then pay who it belongs to. Hey, who wouldn't want to get paid if someone is using their song in their video? But what does Content ID mean for you, the composer or producer trying to get your music into stock music libraries or sync libraries, or just as an artist or producer? What does Content ID mean for you in your everyday work? You may have heard a lot of conflicting advice about this. We're going to talk about it in this video. We've been talking a lot about Content ID on our Discord channel, and if you're not part of that, check the link below in the description. We'd love to have you part of that. We have channels and topics on sync licensing and stock music licensing and all sorts of things we're talking about in there, including Content ID and Taxi and all sorts of stuff. So if you want a safe, fun place to hang out and talk about music stuff, especially relating to what you want to do to make music income, check out the Discord channel. Okay, let's talk Content ID. After much ballyhoo and conversation about Content ID and the different Discord channels and other kinds of things that I'm in that we talk about this, I decided to do some research about Content ID and really find out more about it. Personally, I haven't used it that much, and I'll talk about why as I get towards the end of this video. I know that especially a lot of stock music library people really have strong feelings about Content ID because their stuff is more likely than anything to be used in YouTube videos where there might be some Content ID money. So let's start with stock music libraries, but stick around because we're going to talk about sync licensing right after that and artists in general about that. And then at the end of the video, I'll tell you how I deal with Content ID and what I really think about it. If you have music that is sold in libraries like Pond5 or AudioJungle, Motion Array, and others, you might be very adamant that your music is attached to Content ID. After all, stock music libraries are probably the most likely way that people are going to find and access your music, buy it, and put it in their videos. They go to a site, they pay for a song, or they pay a monthly or yearly fee if it's a subscription library, and they get your music file to put into their YouTube videos. So let's examine this from both your side as the composer and the owner of the music, and the client side. We often don't think about the person on the other end of this transaction. We know that we want to put our music up on these sites and we want to get paid for the person's use, but we don't think about the person that often. Remember, stock music is music for use, not music for you. It's not just about you being paid, it's about you providing a good service for people to use over and over again and year over year. If a royalty-free stock customer picks your music and decides to use it in their YouTube video, they will get a copyright claim on their video. This can distress them thinking they've done something wrong, and they haven't. This is just YouTube hearing the song and making sure that the rightful owner of that music is compensated. But some people may not want their video to be claimed by someone else because they want to monetize it. And this is the real crux of the problem, in my opinion, with Content ID. You want to make sure that your song is used by someone and you're paid for it. But the client wants to monetize their YouTube channel and at least not get a copyright claim against it. The interesting thing here is that YouTube now puts this on copyright claims. This is the language that they use to tell people that this is a claim and it's not like getting a copyright strike where it's threatening. It's just YouTube saying, we'll take care of it and pay who owns it. But that means that the author can't monetize his videos, and who would want to use music that takes away their ability to monetize their YouTube channel? So each of the royalty-free libraries has information for both the buyers and the sellers about Content ID. Pond5 is partnered with AdRev, and they seem to put all of their Content ID issues in this relationship. Here is their webpage about this for buyers. Pond5 does not offer the ability to filter out Content ID songs. They just give this page and say, hey, we use AdRev, here's how to clear up copyright claims, and good luck to you. We will talk about AdRev and other companies like Identify and others that let you put Content ID on your songs. But it's not all rosy for composers, and we'll talk about that towards the end of this video. Now at AudioJungle and Envato, they have pages for both the contributor and the buyer, as well as a fact page. So let's go look at those. Like Pond5, they put the onus on the client to clear it up, or the contributor to either whitelist the channel or leave Content ID off to solve the problem. This is not going to make everyone happy. Let's be clear here, okay? To get rid of a copyright claim as a user, putting music up onto your video, you have to go to a library and get a code so that they will whitelist your video or your channel. Now, if you were a YouTuber wanting to monetize your channel, would you go to all this trouble just to use a piece of music in your video? I wouldn't, and that's why I either use my music or I use no music, or I might even use the YouTube library of free music that you can use. Again, this is something that I think makes Content ID a real hassle for a lot of people, and why a lot of people choose to use non-Content ID music. That's something to think about when you're wanting to use Content ID to make all those pennies from your Content ID tracking services that only pay you a percentage. Okay, so let's talk about Motion Array for a second. They also offer a Content ID fact page, and it looks like this. Why does Motion Array allow YouTube Content ID registered tracks? How does YouTube content even work? How do I ensure that YouTube Content ID knows I have the correct license? I thought Motion Array music was royalty free. What if I don't want Content ID registered tracks? So you see, there's a lot here that clients have to go through in trying to figure out how to use songs that have Content ID attached to them. Unlike Pond5 or AudioJungle, Motion Array lets people exclude Content ID if they don't want to fool with it. So as it says here, you can browse all tracks that do not have Content ID by checking the following filter option, exclude Content ID, when browsing on the marketplace. So this brings up a few issues. First, how many clients will even know how to do this filtering thing, or even know that they need to? It may be that it won't occur to them until they get a copyright claim on their video and they go, what the what? What the what? Then they have to go through all the machinations to clear the claim. And by the way, remember, you might have to become involved in this and helping whitelist their channel. Now, maybe you have a service that does that for you. They take care of that. And that's one of the reasons they only pay you a percentage of what they collect from Content ID, which is already going to be small. The other issue is, if you do know about Content ID and you're a client and you want to avoid any issues, you just filter it out on Motion Array and other services that allow you to filter out Content ID. That means if you have Content ID on your songs and you use Motion Array, you could be losing out on sales. And let me tell you, when you get on Motion Array, you'll find that's probably your bread and butter as far as income from stock music libraries. So you don't want to be filtered out or lose sales because of Content ID. So as you can see by these three examples of arguably the biggest, most used, and best paying of the libraries in stock music, using Content ID is adventure for both you and the client. Also note that AudioSparx will not accept any songs with Content ID, and this year I have made hundreds of dollars there, so that is not something I want to fool with. Although they do offer a service to let you put all your music that you have with them into Content ID, and then they will track it, but then you're just going to have Content ID on everything, and your Motion Array or your Pond5, all your libraries will have to deal with Content ID things. So it's no different than working with some Content ID service. Also, AudioSparx only pays 40% of what it collects in Content ID, and that's not very good. Songtradr also offers a similar kind of service where they'll register the music you upload with them to Content ID. There you get 60% or 80% of what they collect, depending on if you have a free account or paid account. Okay, let's talk quickly about if you should have your songs in Content ID if you're pitching to exclusive sync libraries. If you saw the video that I just did about 5 things you don't need for pitching to exclusive libraries or need to worry about, there's a simple answer for if you need to put Content ID into your songs for exclusive libraries. While this may not be universal, usually when you sign your songs to an exclusive library, they will want to take care of Content ID for various reasons, but that's just what has happened to me with my 3 libraries this year. All 3 have said, and has been in the contract, the songs cannot be in Content ID. So here's an important thing to note. If you're going to put your songs in stock music libraries and then maybe later want to put some of those into an exclusive library, like I've done this year where I've put stuff into my stock libraries and then later on I have pitched that stuff to exclusive libraries and it's got signed, then I'm glad there was no Content ID on them because I don't have to worry about taking it off or figuring out how to get it off of the song because it got signed to an exclusive library. So the answer is simple on this: no. Don't worry about it with sync unless your library says they don't take care of it, but most likely they will, from my experience. Now, if you're an artist or a producer and you are not planning on doing any licensing with your songs at all, other than what someone might pick up and use in a YouTube video or something, then you should definitely do Content ID. And you should just do it through your distributor, through CD Baby or through DistroKid or whoever. The reason you should do this is because it might be used by you in a video or by someone else in a music video or something like that. And if that's the case, yeah, sure, you want your songs to be heard and identified and paid back to your distributor account. All the major distributors, I think, offer this. I know CD Baby does. I know DistroKid does. Although DistroKid charges an extra $5 per year for you to do this, which is my least favorite part of DistroKid. Usually it's a perk at anywhere like CD Baby or Songtradr. And by the way, I go over how Songtradr handles the Content ID service they offer right up here. Now, if you are a composer or a songwriter and you're going to be pitching your songs to music publishers, similarly to pitching to music libraries, I would keep your songs out of Content ID for the time being. Again, just like music libraries, the music publisher may want to control what happens with Content ID from a publishing standpoint. Also, if you've made demos or finished recordings even, but there is no way for your music to be found or used or acquired for use on YouTube, then there's no reason for you to register with Content ID. Just don't worry about that right now. Okay, so let's talk about these companies that collect Content ID royalties for you. And I'm talking about companies like AdRev and Identify and others that collect Content ID. Something I just literally learned yesterday is that when you sign with these companies, and at least with AdRev and Identify, you sign those songs to Content ID for 3 years. So that means if you are going to try to pitch that song to some place that doesn't want Content ID in there, and you're locked into a contract with one of these companies, you're out of luck. Like I said, I have found in 2021 that I put a lot of songs into stock music libraries and then eventually ended up pitching them for exclusive things, and they got into exclusive libraries. If I had them in Content ID through AdRev or something like that, I would be out of luck in getting those songs into those libraries because they would be locked in for 3 years to the Content ID system of those companies. This is something to really think about, and for me, it's like a nail in the coffin for not using Content ID because I can't afford not to have control over pitching songs to bigger opportunities. So here's my final thoughts on Content ID. I'm not doing it for at least several reasons. Number one, it limits my ability to do some work in some libraries. It especially could hurt my motion array sales, and I cannot afford for it to hurt my motion array sales because motion array, at least for me, brings in the most income. Some libraries don't even allow Content ID, like AudioSparx, where I've made hundreds of dollars, and Motion Elements, where I've made $0. But I'm just saying that there are some libraries that won't allow Content ID. I know Artlist doesn't allow you to put songs in there because they want to control what happens. Again, I want to put music in music libraries, set it and forget it unless I need it, and then I'm going to pull it out and go put it in something else. I don't want to fool around with whitelisting things or hearing from clients that can't use my songs or just whatever litany of issues might have to go on with something else. I have enough things to worry about to have to deal with Content ID issues. Number 2, it causes too much problems for clients, and it may cost me more work in the end to have to get them comfortable with using my song, and I don't want to deal with that. Like I said, number 3, it could hurt my ability to pull it out of a royalty-free library and put it into an exclusive one, so I'm not risking that. And number 4, I just don't think any of these companies, and I mean any of the companies, even CD Baby or DistroKid or whoever, pay enough of a percentage, and I don't think that there's enough to take a percentage of. I've had songs in Content ID for years that were part of a lot of the records that I've done, and they just did not pay much at all. I made like $5 through CD Baby for some of my biggest albums, and I've just not seen any income from it. So to me, it's a lot of work and a lot of brain power and problems for clients about very little money. I would rather focus on putting lots of music out, make music income. It's the name of this channel, by the way. To see my video on 5 surprising things you don't need to worry about with sync licensing, including Content ID, check out that video right here, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more of these informative videos. We usually have one coming out about midweek and one on the weekends. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.